Everybody, welcome to Beer Money America, and another lovely day here in San Diego. What's
Yeah,
going
of
on your
course.
way?
Gonna be raining soon, though.
I know, yeah, enough. Fortunately, come March, usually rain kind of clears off, so
Yeah.
enough is enough. Anyways, what's happening your way?
Not a whole lot. Things are pretty good around here. Because it's
Hey,
in
how's the
between
barn
rains.
come or the workshop coming? I forgot to
Oh,
ask you.
yeah, it's finished, done, waterproofed, the whole deal. Got a lot of all my gardening tools and stuff moved in there as of today. Actually, was out there this morning working on some
Yeah.
stuff. So yeah, that's going along. Now I got to build Linda's area so that she can have a little art studio in the back there in the corner.
A
And so,
she shed.
yeah, the she shed gets done next. So, I'll be busy.
Oh man, you guys are gonna have a little compound going on there.
Mm. Well, that's kind of the idea. It's like, I've decided to become a shut-in, so I figure if I can just keep build everything I need, I never have to leave or go anywhere. So it should be good.
Yep, yep, I hear you. I'm with you. Well, that's the weird part about working, being your own boss. Basically, I mean, I've done this since 2001, and so it's like, you know, I I like going out and doing things and visiting people, but it's not like I have to do that every day.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I kind of like that aspect of it. It's
Oh
like
yeah,
you can sort of make your own schedule, and even when
yeah.
you have a lot to do, at least you're in charge of figuring out when you're going to do it.
Oh yeah, yeah. I know. Every once in a while, I'll particularly with some of the bigger clients I have, I'll go to their headquarters, and it's like cubicle city. And I mean, I've worked in those environments long ago. Worked in those environments before, where everybody had their little cubicle, and I literally, it's like PTSD for me. I mean, it's like, oh, I couldn't do this. I just couldn't do this. Thank goodness somebody else does, right? So,
Yeah, well, as I say, it's like in a certain sense, we're all sort of cogs in the machine, and
yep,
all those, you got to have all the cogs, and
totally. Oh yeah,
and I think
totally,
we've all
totally.
had our share of experiences. Like I worked for years in nursing homes, and nursing homes, as much as you want to try and provide the best possible care for all of your patients and that kind of thing, it can be a mill. If you've got
Oh,
to see a
totally.
certain number of people, and they have a certain amount of time, and there's only so many therapists, only so much space, and it's like, so I mean, everybody in at some point in their life has to fill that sort of role. But again,
Right.
right now for me, I'm glad I'm not having to do that
Oh,
anymore.
right. Well, and whenever I come across folks like that, I so appreciate them. I mean, I guess kind of comes back to the server mentality when people get kind of angry at a server at a restaurant or whatever. It's
Yeah,
give me a break. What does this person have to do with whatever the hamburger being cold or whatever, you know? And so I actually truly appreciate those people in that kind of field. And the one that always comes to mind for me every time I have to go into a pharmacy are the pharmacists and all the pharmacy technicians. And I mean, it's just like talking about a mill. I mean, they're just like constantly having to like read these things, be very careful with what they're doing so they don't screw something up, right? But
yeah.
it's just like prescriptions coming in right and left, and people trying to distract them about, can I do this? Can I do that? And it's like, I man, I'm just in awe of anybody that can do that.
Yeah. And it's like, of course, I always go back to third parties and, candidates and things like that. But
Yep.
part of the idea, for me at least, for third parties, the idea of opportunity, because, when you're young, maybe you do work a grunt job and maybe you are
Yeah.
just a cog. But the idea is that you have an opportunity to promote up or move on to something better or change what you're doing or whatever. And so it all comes back to the idea of opportunity. And like generations ago, the idea was that you would promote up through like a single company. You'd start out as in the mailroom and, end your career as the vice president. And it seems like, unfortunately, those type of
Mm.
opportunities are less, but there are new types of opportunities and new ways to do things that has more to do with mobility. It's like instead of being, in one place forever, you work something for a while, then you upgrade your skills or you invest or you change directions at some point, and you sort of continue to change what you're doing until you can rise into a place where you have a little bit more security. But
Yep.
when you have bad economic conditions and you can't change like that, then it sort of gets everybody stuck at a certain level. And then when the people are stuck at a certain level that aren't moving up anymore, that means all the people that want to come in and get in on the ground floor have nowhere to go because the system
Right.
is stagnated. And so,
Yep.
like, it's interesting, because this is just sort of a random conversation that we started having, but it's the idea of opportunity, the idea of promotion, the idea of sort of like starting in one place in your life and then ending up somewhere else. And I mean, that's kind of what it should be. It's like you start
Absolutely.
out, right, and then you end up somewhere else. But I mean, it's sad to some extent. Now you see a lot of people kind of stuck, and that's
Right.
not the best way it should be.
Right. No, and it's a really interesting. I literally had the same conversation last night with somebody at an event I was at, and he works for a small local company
Mm,
that's here, and he's been there 10 years, which is a remarkably long time for a lot of for a career these days. I mean, so many people literally, because he was a younger person, and they work for a year or two and go to a next place and the next place, just trying, right? And but he was saying, he was echoing just what you were saying, that even though he's been there 10 years and he actually likes where he's working and all that, he's ready to get out and go to Colorado and try something different. He's from there
yeah,
originally, Colorado originally, because the opportunity just isn't there. Even though
right.
he likes what he does and he likes the company, they've been good to him and all that kind of stuff. And that's why it's so funny to hear people say, well, back in the good old days, it's like, well, those don't exist anymore for all the reasons, right? Technology, all these things that we don't have to do anymore. There's a
Mm,
reason why people don't build horse and buggy kind of thing, horse buggy
right.
things anymore, right? Stuff. And it's just an interesting phenomenon, and it seems like that's something that a lot of the political parties, and one that, to your point, third parties should do more focus on, is how do we kind of regain that inspiration
Yeah.
and hope. And a lot of that comes down to cost of living, like I know you bring up all the time. It's like, hey, at the end of the day, if it's too expensive, we're
Yeah.
going nowhere, right? And but we're really missing that as a society, it seems like, where there's just that feeling like I got a chance to move up.
Yeah, upward mobility. I think because you have to have some sense that what you're doing is getting you where you want to go a little bit. Because if you feel just like, yeah, I'm doing the same thing over and over again, and there's no opportunity for any kind of advancement, and I'm not really getting myself anywhere. That you start to feel like maybe if there's no point,
Right.
then you can give up. And that's the thing about having a society that promotes upward mobility, and the idea that we were talking about attainable housing. Same thing.
Right.
It's like you want to get to a point where you can get that first house. It's an investment. It's like it's something you look forward to, and it's what you want to do. And so it's like I feel like sometimes now when we have sort of a more benefits based society, where it's about some benefit that you're getting, whether it's like an income, a social security, even things like healthcare. It's like a big part of
Mhm.
compensation is healthcare, but that you don't really advance anything by getting healthcare. It's nice that you have healthcare and you want that, but it's
Right.
not like it's pushing you forward into a next sort of economic level.
Right.
And I feel like there's so many compensation things that are sort of out there that you get stuck in this trap where it's like I'm everything I'm doing is kind of just like almost like a fixed income, and it's like but you've lost the opportunity to really advance unless you completely change what you're doing, and that can be daunting and very difficult, and and even in some cases not even possible for people, and
Right.
it's like
Exactly.
so it's
Yeah,
tough.
and what's weird about that phenomenon is that is not a right or left issue or a liberal
It shouldn't
conservative
be.
issue. It impacts everybody right
Yeah.
now. I mean, I don't care who I talk to, it impacts everybody. And again, going back to the third party, it's like if somebody would focus on kind of those kind of goals of how do we get sort of back to that where there is that at least some feeling that, hey, I got a chance here versus some of the wonky policy things that keep tripping everybody up, and they use as an excuse not to do things, like we're
Right.
kind of seeing right now, right, with the things going on at the border and all that. How long are they going to fight over this? It's been, I don't know, 30, 40 years since we've done anything with the border. It's like, and again, you can look at both sides on that one to fault, if you're going to look for a fault. But it's just an excuse not to address what are probably more fundamental issues of how do you get people back to feeling like I'm going to go somewhere.
Yeah. And
That's
that's what I
what
said.
America was all about.
There was one thing that I wanted to bring up because I had another one of these spoiler conversations, which I end up having a lot as a person who promotes third parties. But the person I was talking to was working with another of the third parties that are in the area. Again, I'll stay
Right.
away from names, but it's a third party. And what I was saying to him is that, well, let me sort of say what, because I get this all the time from people. It's the idea that this particular election that we're coming to is so dire because of the
Hmm.
candidates that are running that you know we have to just pick a one of the two candidates and go for it because you can't afford to be a spoiler. And the thing that occurred to me with that, and kind of what I wanted to bring up, was the idea that if you're going to make a third party, this is precisely the time where you have to stick to your guns. If
Right.
if you're saying I'm making a third party, and my philosophy is when things are okay and there's
Right.
nothing really on the line, then I'll support the third party. But otherwise, I'm just going to go with one of the other two parties. Well, then you've basically just torpedoed the idea that your party has some kind of meaning or significance.
Yep.
Because it's like, okay, when things are bad, I'm just going to be a Democrat. When things are bad, I'm just going to be a Republican. No, you have to say there is a reason for third parties to exist, and we need the new perspective to push things in the right direction. And you have to be, I think, in some sense, you have to be almost willing to accept, but potentially what you would regard as a catastrophic outcome in the
Yep.
short term to get something better in the long term. Because if we always just revert back to this idea that, oh, no, this particular election is so serious, I have to go and do something else. Well, then you
You're
don't
never going to do anything.
you're
Right.
never going to do anything.
Yeah.
And so I think because I've continually had that conversation, and in California, obviously it's really easy to attack the Republicans in California, right? They don't do anything, nobody cares about them, they're meaningless.
Right.
But people don't always want to attack the Democrats. But
Right.
again, if you're not willing to do that, and in fact you go so far as to have the person who basically founded your party endorse a Democrat, then you're basically just saying that we're just Democrats.
Yeah.
So I mean,
Exactly.
you've got to be able to look at both sides, differentiate yourself from the sides, and then have enough constitution to say we're going to support this new movement even in bad times because the new movement has meaning and it's important.
Well, and I would also argue now is the time because it shouldn't be a spoiler effect because
Right.
the Gallup poll that I was going to start to talk about that just came out this I don't know the last couple of weeks. They show 43% across the country. 43% are now considered independent.
Hmm.
And Republicans and Democrats are literally at 27% each.
Yeah, it's
And
crazy.
so it's like, well, wait a minute. I mean, now is the time, right? Now is the time. Obviously, people are not satisfied for all the reasons, and the numbers actually bear it out. So you're not actually going to be a spoiler if people just stick to
Right.
their guns, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't say independent's necessarily going to win any particular race, but the numbers are there,
Right.
right? So that if people really want to, pull that trigger, it couldn't be a better time, really.
Yeah. As I say, it's too bad that some of the previous attempts at, I've said this on the cast before that I was a Reform Party uh,
Right.
proponent. And it's too bad that that didn't get more of a hold because now that we've come to this point where so few people have any respect for either of the two major parties, if there really was something that somebody could attach themselves to, I
Yep.
mean, it would really have a lot of potential, which is why I kind of like occasionally bring up RFK Jr. And
Right.
again, I make the disclaimer: I don't really agree with everything that he says or all of his policies,
Right.
but just from a pure political standpoint, it would be really interesting to see what he does. I mean, if he can
Right.
actually get on the ballots in all 50 states, and there are so many people who are so dissatisfied with things, it would
Yep.
be interesting to see,
No,
what kind of
totally agree.
coalition together.
And I love the fact that he ran an ad during the Super Bowl.
Yeah, that was
he,
crazy.
he he was kind of putting it in people's face. It's like, hey, there's another way here,
Yeah.
and I agree. It doesn't matter who the candidate is. You're not going to agree 100%. I don't
Right.
think, or at least if you're a rational human being, you're probably not going to agree 100% with anything any candidate says. But no, that was fascinating. Well, it also kind of comes back to the whole just cycle of people being in their silos. The funny thing is, that happened this week for me was, Jon Stewart came back on the Daily Show. I don't
Oh,
know
I
if you've
heard
ever
about that.
watched him, and so right after that happened, he's considered a liberal and progressive, all that kind of stuff, and he skewered Biden, and he skewered Trump and Biden both, right? And right after that, because it's like scrolling through YouTube, I'm seeing all these things pop up on all these progressive, talking heads just lambasting him for how could you do that? How could you skewer Biden for this thing, that he's too old and he, done all these conservative things when he's really supposed to be progressive. Well, and, because you're going to now allow Trump to be elected.
Right.
It's just like, give me a break. I mean, that's the whole point, that we need to put their feet to the fire and look at options because otherwise we're going to just keep coming back to the same two.
Yeah, you just keep doing the same thing over and over again. It's never going to get any better. But I
It
have to
makes
say something about the whole Biden thing, just because I couldn't believe it when I saw it. The special counsel report,
oh
where he, the special counsel essentially said that he had retained documents in violation of the law,
yeah,
but he was like non compos mentis. He's not capable of standing trial because of his mental capacity.
right.
And the more I've thought about that, it's like, and some of the Republicans are starting to say this, it's like, you have to either make a choice. He either broke the law and stands trial, or he's incompetent to be the president of the United States. If he can't stand trial, he can't be the president.
Right.
So it's like, which one is it going to be? And it's like, that is one of the most bizarre things I think I've ever seen in politics. I mean, it's just,
Everything about it is bizarre. His response to it was bizarre too, where
yeah,
I mean, he kind of played or proved the point a little bit about the opinion about his mental capacity with some of his answers,
yeah,
which was a little scary.
yeah,
But also I guess the main thing is, well, is it really the role of the special prosecutor to determine his mental state?
yeah,
Uh, I don't think so. That's really not their job. Now, I think it's fair to say to maybe bring that up in conversation somewhere because this was reminiscent of Reagan, right?
yeah.
I mean, in his second term, people were like, I don't know, and is he really running the show or not? And I mean, they're fair questions to ask, but people knew when they were voting what they were voting for. It
Yeah.
wasn't like he was a spring chicken at the time.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know,
I think in the end, because we're so close to an election, that the general right course is to just have the election and let
yeah,
people make the decisions they want to make. So
yeah.
that's sort of where I land on that whole thing. But it was just
It
like,
was
it was so strange. I mean, it was that's one of the weirdest things to ever come out of a special counsel that I can ever think of. It just,
yeah,
I was
yeah.
astounded by it.
Well, and that's kind of where we're at. I mean, the
Exactly.
I mean that kind of wrapped it up in a little nutshell about just how ridiculous things have become,
Right.
and all the more reason we need to just move it along and just maybe it's baby steps. It's not going to happen this time, but just baby steps to start looking anywhere and everywhere we can for third party candidates, and
Yeah.
because it's and again the numbers are on. our
Yeah,
side. That's the
yeah,
crazy
absolutely.
part.
And as I say, I think that that's why I like doing this podcast because
Yep.
even though we're probably a small voice in the wilderness,
Yeah.
to say the least, let's be modest, shall we? But it's like if any attention can get drawn to it and more people can get interested in it, more it's not just us. It's going to be us plus thousands of other people. And this kind of goes back to frankly what we were saying. It's like people looking for opportunity, looking for things to do, looking for a way to sort of change their life circumstances. Well, there's so much media opportunity out there in doing
Yep.
things like this. And things like this, if they do get popularized, people monetize them, and that can become a career. And so
Yeah.
if there are people willing to raise their voices in enough places over enough period of time, maybe we really can start to get a change because there is a common cause, I think, out there that we need to change the political system, and the only way to change the political system is to inject new life into it, new
Right.
parties, new
Right.
ideas. And
Right.
so,
Yeah.
I feel hopeful at least in that sense.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And no, when I saw that number, it was like I knew it was fairly high, but I didn't realize it was 43%. So
Mm.
and I'm sure, and that was the point of the whole thing is it has grown quite quickly in the last few years just because of all the
Yeah.
insanity going on. So, anyways, so I've got a proposal for your new party, a new
Okay.
platform. Okay, so we were talking about attainable housing,
Hmm.
right? So here's my proposal. Instead of spending billions of dollars trying to solve the homeless crisis, we take some of that money and say, "Hey, anybody that wants to move to Texas, we'll pay you 20 grand. If you live there for 5 years, we'll pay you 20 grand. We'll give money ahead. We get rid of like 1 million people out of California, and then we'll have 1 million homes available instantly. And the only caveat is if they have, and then we'll maybe double it if they have an assault rifle. You get twice as much money to go. Then that way everybody's happy. California constituents is happy. Texas is happy. They got more guns and they got more people. What do you think of
Well,
that?
I think there may be only one flaw in your plan, which is that might already be happening. I mean, with the number of people that are actually leaving California anyway, you might not need to give them anything at all. They're already out the door. So we'll have to, who knows? Maybe we've got our first win and we didn't even know it yet.
Well, that's true. I was just trying to speed up the process. Hey, get more
Yeah,
of them out of here faster, and it would help with traffic. It would lower the cost of housing. I think it's a win for everybody. So
yeah.
I don't know.
Well,
That was
as I
my
say,
my
it'll
thought.
be interesting to see.
Anyways, so what else is going on? From a local standpoint, it was funny. I was talking at the same event to another local politician here, and they're starting to plan parks. This is how crazy it is. I feel actually again. It's kind of going back to like the pharmacists and stuff. I'm beginning to appreciate more and more what at least at the local level politicians go through because they're having hearings about something you would think would be a very positive thing. It's like, hey, we're going to have a new park in this area, right? And they're just getting beat up because nobody wants them to have a public restroom at the park. And
Yeah,
it's like, okay, well, if it's a public park and somebody wanted to actually make it so if you wanted to plan a birthday party there, you actually have to pay. It's like, well, that kind of defeats the idea of a public park. So, but that's the kind of stuff, it's kind of going back to our conversation last week that it's, for the local politicians, all politicians, but particularly local ones, they do have to deal with just kind of that
yes.
mentality of, and they do have to try and balance it. So I can kind of see where they get a little gun shy over certain things and trying to take some chances
Yeah.
because you we do need to take some chances, right? Because what we're doing is not working. And but I can at least understand the mentality of what they go through. It's like, man, I'm getting whipsawed from both sides. And am I really going to put myself out there to suggest this? And I guess my answer to that is all the more reason we need to have more candidates, people that are willing to do it.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's interesting because there also has to be a mechanism to sort of, look at candidates that have done, look at politicians, local politicians who have done well, and
Yep.
get them to advance, you know, forward. Because right now, I think a lot of what you see is that you have some local politicians who are doing some things well, and then they get termed out, or again, they want to advance their career just like anyone else.
Sure.
And you get to a point where, okay, now it's time to move on to the next thing, maybe a state level, you know.
Right.
So, but the ones that are doing well are not the ones being supported by the Democrats or the Republicans. The Democrats and Republicans are appointing the people that they can control, not the people who are actually doing things for people. And again, by
Yep.
creating that third party, you're creating an avenue where you can help the people who are actually doing things that are helpful and
Yep.
get them to move forward. You're creating a lane for the actual doers to get promoted, as opposed to the party apparatchiks, who just get, you know, because of the
Yeah.
people they.
You nailed it because that was part of the conversation we had, and I won't reveal what party he was part of, but he said because I am trying to push on certain things, I'm kind of going against on this one particular issue he was telling me about against my party. And he says, I really don't know if they're going to support me on the next one because they're so peeved about my stance that I took with the other side because in my mind it made
Made
sense,
sense, right?
right?
Yeah,
And to your point, I mean, that's the bizarre nature of it, and also to your point last week that I keep reminding myself of too is that these are private organizations,
right,
and
exactly,
they're incented to keep everybody in line, so they keep bringing in the money,
right.
and that's the brutal honesty of it.
Mm.
And
Yeah, no,
and it played out, when he was telling me that, it's like, wow, that's crazy. You're trying to do the right thing, um, and you're going to get dinged for it.
yep. And that's the uphill battle that we have to climb, and that's why, in part, that I'm going to attempt to start my own party, and I have to put together a committee, and I have to do some other things, and I submit it somewhere. But it's the idea that if I can make that work, and I don't know that I can because I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing.
You only know unless you try, right? You only know
But
unless you try.
if I can get it to work, then you know my party could back candidates or have candidates run, and because I'm completely disinterested in anything that the Democrats or the Republicans are doing, then you could have candidates that really had a free
Right,
reign to do what they felt was right and
right,
be completely removed from the current political situation. And again, as
right.
I say, I don't know if I'll ever actually make this thing work because it's like a
It's a
nightmare.
lot. No, it's a gargantuan task. Oh
It's
yeah, for sure.
it's crazy, but it's like it's an interesting experience to sort of check
Yeah,
out all the things that the FEC has on, that you have to sort of like try and work your way through. So
yeah.
it'll be interesting.
Well, no, and it will be interesting, an interesting exercise because I mean, part of what I've always thought about is whether you even need a party. If you can, at least a party in the traditional sense of the word, where if you can again somehow rally these folks, and they need to have some tent to all kind of fall under, so
Hmm.
that's why parties exist. I get it, but because of the social media world and online stuff that we live in, I mean, that can be done in so many different ways where if you can just get them to all kind of swim in one direction
Yeah.
without all the craziness that goes along with trying to actually form a party, is that even doable? I mean, when you look at so many of the civil rights things that have happened, or just people getting pissed about whether Taylor Swift should be at an NFL game. I mean, stuff that just all the crazy things people do get focused on without any real organization behind it, right? It makes me think, well, there's still hope that you could kind of do that. And if you can identify those third party candidates or independents, and just trying to get the momentum behind them.
Yeah. Well, I have to mention this because my wife and I were having this conversation essentially like this about getting everyone to move in the same direction. And she came up with the idea that we should refer to that as herding the purple goats.
I love it. I'm on board. I endorse that 1,000%.
So
That
if we can
well,
herd purple goats down the middle, we'll have it made.
well, and yeah, as we go along, you'll learn more and more about goats from me. But they are a herding animal, and
Yeah.
there's always one goat that's in the back watching out to make sure they're all going in the right direction. There's one leader, and then there's all these people, all the goats in the middle, and actually, now we're really going off on tangent. When you go hiking with them, because that's been where I've had experience with them, is at night they literally will sleep in a circle because they're watching out for each other. It's really fascinating. And
All
there'll
right.
always be like one, if there's a high spot, there'll be one up on a little hill uh, watching out. And it always was a great metaphor for me that on this whole independent thing, it's like you can be independent because goats are independent.
Oh yeah.
They all have personalities, but they still work in unison when it comes to the greater whole. So that's why it was the perfect metaphor for me.
Yeah. Yeah. No. So as I say, now we have a cause for our show. Herd the purple goats in the right direction.
Well, speaking of that, hold on. I had a friend make up this. See if it comes in.
That's great.
There you
That's
go. We already got merch going. Anyways, all right. Well, enough of that craziness. I think we're about
Yeah. About through.
time to wrap it up.
Good
And
place to end.
good conversation. And I think, well, and I know we both agree on this. I mean, I think the real goal of what we're doing is just trying to get people to start talking.
Yeah. For sure.
And get the conversations going out there because that's what we need is people just talking to each other and kind of figuring it out because the people that we've elected at this point aren't figuring it out.
Yeah.
So it's up to us. You got to
Right.
be, you got to, we are in a democracy and it's supposed to be about participation. So,
Yeah. And the special interest groups out there, the moneyed interest, they have their representation. So
yeah.
in a real way, the new party that's going to come along, that's going to be able to change things, it's going to have to start from the ground up. It's going to have to start from people just generally getting together and using the power of numbers,
Yep.
to get something done because the moneyed interests have bought into the two
Oh,
party system.
totally.
So if it's going to change, then you're going to have a lot of people willing to look at new ideas and kind of start moving in the same direction. So I think we make a contribution to that by having this podcast, and I'm sure other people will do as well.
Yeah. I hope so. I hope we get thousands of these things going on, right?
Absolutely.
Yep. You know, and so that's how it'll work. All right. We'll leave it there, and it was a good one.
Yeah. And I say good show, and I'll be in touch with you soon.